Well, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation has partnered up with the ProFuturo Foundation, as well as the South African Department of Basic Education, to expose African learners to digital technology in order to equip them for a, one would say, competitive digital world, isn't it? The aim of this project is to leverage technology to close the educational gap between, because it's been proven that digital technology can ensure access to quality education for everyone, anywhere in the world. And that's the point. It's access to this type of education using those tools anywhere in the world. Lukhanyo Neer is the convener of the Thabo Mbeki Youth Hub. He joins us now live. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Lukhanyo.
Hi there, thank you so much for having us.
Look, so the aim, as I understand it, is to promote access to universal and quality education. As you know, we live in a very unequal world, one might say. Equal opportunity for children from vulnerable groups and disadvantaged backgrounds is extremely important, you would agree. How will this project address this massive challenge?
Sure. So when we came up with the project, it really came off the back of President Mbeki's trip to Spain in 2018, and where he met the leaders of Telefonica Foundation and La Caixa Banking Foundation. And it was from that encounter where we realized that there is, in fact, a massive digital gap that exists, especially in rural spaces, both in South Africa and across the continent. And our thesis is that once we begin to close that gap, we'll be able to better ensure that a whole lot more young people are able to, one, get better outcomes from education, but secondly, also that they are also able to contribute in much more meaningful ways in the economy of the continent and the countries as well. Right. So we really hope that from this program, as we introduce digital learning to learners, that they'll be able to, one, learn better and be able to contribute a whole lot better as well.
So how would it work? I understand that 50 schools have been identified in Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape, 25 in each province. What criteria did you use when identifying these schools?
So let me give you just one tad bit of background, and I'll answer the question but directly. So in 2018, two things happened, right? So the first one, President Mbeki goes to Spain and he meets these two foundations. The second one, in September, the foundation held an event looking at education in the 21st century. And President Mbeki spoke alongside Sam Paddock, one of the co-founders of Get Smarter, as well as Songoba Vuba. At this event, President Mbeki essentially gave the young people in the room a challenge to examine and investigate the opportunities and challenges that come about as a result of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We then formed a working group that looked at the entire education system. Right? There were three things that we looked at. It was particularly interesting to this program. One was the digital gap. The second was the rural-urban divide, and the third was the information gap that exists.
Yeah.
What we then realized equally in this exercise was that the challenges that exist really require us to really hone in on digital and digital solutions as well. So what we then did, we then worked with the DBE to find 50 schools, as he said, and really the criteria for us was trying to understand two things. One, schools that are in really rural areas. Second one were schools in peri-urban areas. Because we were really interested in piloting and seeing, because a lot of the conversations are really focused on the urban environment, right? And so these schools that we've chosen are in two particular areas. In Mpumalanga, they're in Buhlabela. In the Eastern Cape, they are in Amatole district. And so we're interested in examining what happens when you begin to introduce digital solutions in these areas, and hoping that the outcomes are really exponential. And in fact, the end goal for us is that we reach over 1 million learners over the next few years.
Look, during these uncertain times of COVID-19, Lukhanyo, technology is no longer seen as a luxury. E-learning has become so important during this time, but there are still millions of people around the world who are unable to even connect to the internet. COVID-19 has emphasized the so-called digital divide. I guess the goal in South Africa and many other countries on the continent is to bridge this divide. What do you think is the best possible route to achieving this goal?
Sure. So we are thinking about this quite intensely at the moment. I think part of the big issue you have is that no one, and we even hearken to say, even the government doesn't have a 360-degree view of the entire education system, right? Our thesis is that there are thousands and thousands of actors that are working in the system at the moment, right? But none of them are actually working in a very coordinated manner, right? And this has become quite clear in the last few weeks, right? So the minister announces that the government has decided that they're going to reopen schools on the 1st of June.
Yeah.
They then say that they're going to equally ensure that schools are sanitized, make sure that PPE is in place. The day after this announcement, the unions come out with a statement saying that they've run a baseline survey with principals, and they haven't found, and some of these principals haven't found any of the interventions that the DBE has said that are in place, right? We think one of the things that's truly important at this moment is really beginning to coordinate the response, both from a national government level all the way down to a school level, alongside non-state actors, understanding what is in place in schools, what isn't in place in schools. Which schools have got broadband infrastructure? Which schools have got adequate infrastructure inside the classroom? Which schools have got water, electricity, and they've got all the components that are necessary for a fully functioning school. Yeah. Once we truly understand these interventions, we're then able to mobilize and coordinate the responses of both state and non-state actors, right? The challenge we have now is that a lot of the interventions that must take place in the short term, we simply don't have enough time to make sure that all the learners have got access to all the digital solutions, right? But if we begin to understand where the gaps lie in the system, we're able to go to corporate partners and say, corporate partners, schools X, Y, and Z in Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, and Northern Cape don't have any digital infrastructure, right? How do we then supplement that? So a lot of what needs to take place moving forward is really coordinating the sector and mobilizing resources to close the gaps that exist there. So a lot can still happen, right? How do we work with mobile providers? How do we work with different institutions surrounding the communities and begin to plug these gaps, right? Looking at both the short, medium, and long term.
Because time is of the essence, isn't it? COVID-19 has really pushed us mentally and physically in order to think about these solutions quicker, because we're running out of time in terms of this. You know, we need solutions now. The way we work has changed dramatically due to COVID-19. Many are forced to work from home. Some, say working from home is the new trend that will grow in the future. So we need to be mindful of that. Equipping a child with information and communications technology skills at a young age, how would that change their prospects for future development?
Sure. So let me say this quickly, right? The education system is a really massive beast, right? Over 12 million learners, about 400,000 teachers, 25,000 schools, right? The kind of change that is required there is not the kind of change that can take place in 6 weeks, right? And I think it is important that we bear in mind the scale of the system, right? Yeah. But more directly to where you are, is the fourth industrial revolution really is an age that requires young people to be able to interact both with the physical world as well as the digital world, right? And we think that a number of the schools, of the 25,000 schools that we have, simply do not have access to any of the infrastructure. And in fact, quite frankly, it isn't fair on them nor on the country that the first time they would encounter a computer, the first time they'd encounter a tablet is when they turn 18, when they go to university or a TVET college, right? So part of what we're really trying to do is how do we provide a tablet solution inside the classroom with the assistance of an educator, and we help plug the gaps in the education system and allow the learner to learn both at their own pace inside the classroom and give them multiple ways of learning, right? So the opportunity that does come with a digital solution is that in the traditional sense, you would have a teacher instructing from the front and using a textbook, right? When you use a digital solution like the one we have with ProFuturo, you're able to provide the learner with multiple ways of understanding the same kind of content, right? Okay. Which allows them to plug to address the challenge that they might be having at any given point.
There's so much to discuss with regards to the digital space. I probably would like to have you back in the near future to pick your brain on this, because there's so many low-hanging fruits that we can pick at this stage to fundamentally change the way our children learn. And because the future is now, isn't it, Lukhanyo? The future is now. We really need to press on and get this going, because COVID-19, as I said, has pushed us to a point where we need to start thinking on our feet very quickly. Lukhanyo, thank you very much indeed for your perspective. Be well.
Thank you very much.
All right, Lukhanyo Neer is the convener of the Thabo Mbeki Youth Hub. We're going to take a quick break. I'll get you more news next. Stay with us.